Thanks, Abel. Okay, so my name's Matt Colmer, and I work with the Catapult Network, the UK Catapult Network, amongst other things. I'm actually independent, so I work with, not for, which is just a clarification with that. And I base mainly at the Digital Catapult, which just happens to be down the road, opposite the British Library. Just a real quick show of hands. Do people know or are familiar with the Catapult Network? Just quickly stick hands up. Okay, that's not so, okay, 50%, that's cool. So, just to give a bit of a whistle stop, I will explain a little bit more about what the Catapults are doing, but what I will be covering under this presentation will be the intro to DigiCat and the Catapult Network, how we specifically help SMEs, the SME blockchain landscape. So this is some research that we've been doing over the past 4 months, and is still very new, so I can give some bits of information, but we're just wrapping it up now. We will be publishing it coming in October. But there's two key parts of this research we've done, is SMEs in the UK working in distributed ledger, not just blockchain, but distributed ledger, and specifically DLT and construction, which is the work that I've been doing. And then I will go on to just a bit about industrial strategy and funding opportunities, primarily because my funding comes from Innovate UK, and so all of the opportunities I have, I pitch their industrial strategy work. So there's a bit of a at the end, but it's some good opportunities to access some of that funding coming up. So ultimately, the catapults, there's a network of 10 catapults throughout the UK. I'm based at Digital, but also work with Future Cities and the Energy Systems catapults. The catapults are here to basically help grow the UK economy in various areas. We have ones in connected transport, offshore renewables, medicines discovery, satellite applications. You get the kind of the gist of these areas that the catapults work in. And the reason that we are here is to recognise, well, we've recognised that there are areas where the UK has expertise, and that expertise is sometimes lost because the ability to push knowledge through into the wider commercial world sometimes doesn't happen, and we get overtaken by other countries in turning expertise in that area. The classic one that we use at Digital is the Internet and Tim Berners-Lee. Everything, it all started in the UK, but then got hijacked by the United States, so we kind of lost that leading edge. So that's the point of the Catapult Network. I'm based, as I said, at Digital, and we specialise in immersive technologies, so that's VR, AR, mixed reality, artificial intelligence, and machine learning, future networks, and increasingly now distributed ledger technologies. We have we help organisations in various different ways. As a caveat, and to explain the difference, so we're part funded by Innovate UK, we're part of the Innovate UK family, so part government funded, but we also undertake commercial work, we also undertake grant work, so work that we will pitch in for government funding or European funding and get funded through that way. We tend, as a network, not to give money out ourselves. That tends to be what the research councils and Innovate UK do. We're one step on from that. So what we do is we offer facilities, we offer access to equipment and specialisms which may not be readily available to SMEs. We also work with corporates in order to be able to de-risk those areas for corporates, so they can go into a way of finding, so they get introduced to the SMEs, they get introduced to government, they get introduced to legal people, they get introduced to finance. And we do that in a neutral way, because we have that government link and we have that government funding. We can de-risk some of these areas to help those collaborations. So those are the key areas that we really work in. So it's across the board, but don't come knocking on a catapult's door looking for a funding, because that's not what we do. Go and knock on the Innovate UK's door. So in terms of the advanced digital technologies which we are looking at, we've identified 3 areas which are specifically important to enabling a digitally transformed economy. As as I said, that's future networks, which is in essence 5G, low-powered wide area networks, and the Internet of Things. And we do that through various different activities. We have the Things Connected project. We have which is machine-to-machine communications. How do you actually get the IoT to work without using any kind of the internet infrastructure? 5G test beds, and the low-powered wide area network, which is looking at communications on a very like a city scale. We've got the first LoRaWAN set up on the top of the Catapult. That was the first one in London. Immersive is interesting as well. So we have the virtual, augmented and mixed reality suites. We have 4 immersive labs in the UK, plus the Dimension suite down in Wimbledon, which is very high-powered movie scale, green screen studios. We also work a lot in haptics, which is the feedback, so the physical feedback through ultrasonic. And again, with the artificial intelligence and machine learning, we have the machine intelligence garage, which we're working at the moment, which primarily gives access to SMEs and startups to some really high-powered kit. I don't work in AI, so I'm going to use all the wrong words, but we have some new NVIDIA kit, which is the first in the UK, I think apparently it is, which is some really high-powered AI machine, which we enable people to actually use within the facility down in Euston, just a little bit down the road. So the 2 areas we focus in really, in terms of, so those are the technology areas. The 2 themes we focus in are manufacturing, in which construction is a growing part of the manufacturing agenda now, how we start looking at construction as manufacturing, changing that mindset along the transforming construction agenda, and the creative economy as well. One of the battles I've had with the Catapult, I've been there for about 2.5 years now, probably 2-3 years, is really trying to instill in them the idea that construction at the very beginning is part of a creative economy. It's design-led. If you start getting the design bits right first, then you can start following on through from the entire construction system. If you keep construction lifestyle, if you keep that design ethos in mind. And we're now really realizing that a lot of the applications from the creative industries can really help in looking at some of the key challenges of design and construction. My background is in building performance, so I worked with Innovate UK for many years looking at their building performance, their built environment agenda, looking at why we design to X and then build it, and then when we use it at the end it does something completely different. And there are a lot of pinch points along that journey where communication is key, and the creative economy and the creative side is very good at using those communication cues. A little bit of an aside there. But those are the 2 areas we look at. I will be looking at focusing really on the manufacturing side we're doing at the moment, which is where most of our blockchain and distributed ledger technology work is coming from. So, we've been working in DLT at the Catapult probably for the last 18 months, really, I suppose, in terms of looking at where the application could be, SMEs in the market, and really how we as an organisation can help grow awareness and demonstrators and proof of concepts in DLT in the longer term. We've recently completed a piece of work looking at the DLT market across the UK. And we've come to a conclusion that at the moment it's going to change every day. So by the time this number was completed, it was about 280 organisations in the UK that recognise that they are DLT centric, or that their activities are actually enabled via distributed ledger technology. We then went along a more inquisitive route. So we then started looking at and interviewing some of these companies to say, okay, so what are you actually doing? What are the challenges you have? Where do you think you sit in the market? Where are you coming from your funding scenarios? Where how do you think you interact with the verticals in the market? What are the established companies and the establishment thinking about you as your organisations? And we interviewed up with, I think it was about 20%, so we about 50, 60 organisations we interviewed, and some of them responded to all the questions. Some of them were a little bit cagey, but ultimately when we were saying that in terms of the proportion of companies' activities enabled by DLT, these are the startups, we saw that a lot of them, almost half of them, decided or classified themselves as entirely blockchain or DLT related companies. We use blockchain and DLT interchangeably in a lot of these scenarios. We're not saying that it is a blockchain company. We're trying to keep it to DLT, but when we talk to the masses, I suppose this is not a masses, I don't want to put you into that group, but without having to go through a whole description about the difference between blockchain and DLT, so they were, a lot of them were wholly engaged with the DLT agenda. So we then looked at them in terms of where their financial status was, or where they were in terms of the financial position they were in. So at the moment, clearly a lot of them are looking for financial support. That's really unsurprising. What was surprising actually was the level. 74% said yes, but the 26% said that they weren't necessarily seeking finance. And when questioned a little bit more deeply about this, some of them were saying that actually they have a clientele, which means that they can fund it already. So they actually have a business model that comes up, which means that they can support their business, or that they've got other sources of funding, which means they don't necessarily have to go to the market to seek it. Now that could be serial entrepreneurs that have exited, or that they're supporting it in other private means. But it was quite interesting that the level of seeking investment is actually, the no's were more than you would expect in a startup or a nascent economy that we see in terms of DLT. So companies by funding stage, again, we were looking at this, and pre-seed were no, angel 5. The interesting one is the ICO. For the initial coin offering, that was only 5%. And again, we were quite surprised by that, because there's been like quite a lot of press that there's been an overprevalence of ICOs in the last 12 months, and whether we were seeing sort of saturation in the market, and whether this was causing a challenge as a new funding regime. But in the UK, that does not seem to be a huge issue. And again, while challenged about this, it was the uncertainty of the financial market and the uncertainty of the recognition that you would get from an initial coin offering. And there was a uncomfortableness about going down that route in terms of the longevity of what that would actually mean for business. And so we then asked them about the company, the markets they operate in specifically, but then also the vertical markets which they thought that they were relevant to. Now, most of them said it was all markets. They're fairly blatant about saying, we will have a blockchain solution, or we will have a DLT solution, and you come to us and we will give you whatever solution. We have the expertise and we can deliver it. But over and above that, the next one down there was finance. And this is an interesting point again, because when we asked people what they identified as, or SMEs what they identified as their organisation, they didn't identify as fintech. They identified as other sectors within the economy. But when asked about, okay, what verticals do you work in, they're saying, we can work in finance. And again, that could be because of the uncertainty and the reluctance for a company who is starting up to say that they are a fintech company, because of the barriers that seems to raise when it starts looking at really basic issues of running a DLT organisation or a DLT company, such as, can I get a bank account? And that kind of scenario there. So it's interesting that the companies will say, well, yeah, we operate in a financial, we have a financial product or product that could be applicable to the finance scenario, but we're not a fintech company. Seems to be a little bit of smoking there. So moving on to DLT in construction, I did a specific piece of work where we're asking large construction companies or people who are active in the construction industry in the UK about their appetite, readiness, and understanding, I suppose. Understanding is a bit of a challenging one because people have different levels of understanding, but really in terms of would you be happy to undertake a project or some kind of activity which is DLT centric? That was the essence of what we were talking about. I spoke to 32 construction specific organisations. Again, a caveat with this is that I contacted about 60, and the 32 that came back, actually more than that, it was probably about 82 I think in total. And the ones that came back are the ones that you would likely associate with innovative thinking within the construction industry. I'm not going to name any names, but so we could probably automatically assume that some of this sample is got a bias towards looking at different solutions. So they're already looking at AI, they're already looking at immersive technologies, they're already looking at these kind of things. And DLT is absolutely in the mix in there. And probably one of the reasons they would respond positively when others say, no, we can't help you, is because it is that level of understanding. The ones that said, no, we can't help you, don't have that level of understanding, so they thought they couldn't contribute. Which was a shame, because the point of the surveys was to understand the readiness of the market. So I needed the ones to come back to say, no, I don't understand, but unfortunately they didn't. So we spoke to 32 organisations in total. And one of the questions we asked when I first started up the interview, so these were, one-to-one interviews, was what are the top 3 challenges that you feel that you are facing in construction at this time? So with the whole digital transformation malarkey going on, what do you think what are your top 3? And the speed of change was the most consistent answer across the board. One of the real problems was that the slow movement of the construction industry, and the somewhat technophobic attitude towards of the construction industry meant that they were unable to make a decision because things were moving too quickly. They felt a little bit of inertia there. The other scenarios that the other 2 ranked second. The second was legacy systems, in terms of they've got a whole load of, they can't deal with what they've got with at the moment, they've got a whole load of legacy stuff that happens, they don't have good data strategies, and faced with then having to do something new, which is essentially data focused, filled them with a bit of fear. And then there was understanding about DLT in the first place. That's not a lack of understanding, but a lack of clarity about really, really what it meant. And again, that boiled down to the fact that with construction, is we don't really have any clear or necessarily compelling use cases. I'm not saying we need demonstrators or proof of concepts or anything like that. It's theoretical use cases about this is what DLT can do for you. And there's a lot of hyperbole and there's a lot of hype out there, and I think there's a challenge in terms of understanding about really what the business benefit of using a DLT solution is in a very clear and unopaque language. When asked from a construction point of view, when they thought that DLT solutions would be emerging into the market, it was about 3 to 5 years. Key point here is emerging, so this is not necessarily ones which are commercially available and they would take up, but these are ones that these are the proof of concept, so they can start getting these use cases, start fitting something into a digital strategy. When you're looking at whether DLT technologies or DLT-based solutions would be mature or maturing in the market, we're looking then between 7 and 10 years, and established would be 10 years plus. And interestingly again, and I want to caveat this in terms of these are engaged organisations. These are engaged mostly tier ones and specialist contractors. These are organisations that are already following kind of the innovation landscape. When asked specifically about whether they felt they were prepared enough to undertake a project which was DLT based, and that could be a proof of concept, it could be a demonstrator, or it could be like a kind of a workshopping, brainstorming bit. Would they be able to? Do they feel prepared enough to do it? 81% of them said yes. So there is an appetite for something to happen, but a significant inertia about what that something is. So we then have to paint them a picture, paint some of these tier ones a picture about what it is that they could potentially start to do. So there are 4 things that we, I believe from this research, that we actually need to start doing immediately to help some of these companies be able to make these decisions. The first one is the acceleration of skills and services from other sectors to allow for collaborations with DLT. They can't do it on their own, there's just not the expertise there. And again, without clear use cases or a strategic direction, there's not going to be that investment to start getting these skills in. They want to internalise the skills, but they have to find them from elsewhere. Demonstrations of proof of concepts will allow for meaningful decision making. Again, this is, I was specifically asking them the question about, do you have DLT in your 5-year strategy? And they say, if you can tell me what DLT does, we can include it in our strategy. It's a bit of chicken and egg, tail chasing. The key thing is government support as well, and a clear roadmap for implementation. We still have to be very aware that the public sector does an awful lot of financing for construction in the UK, especially with big projects. And public procurement has come significantly under the microscope recently. And when we start looking at the rollout and implementation of BIM, where a roadmap was given, or a kind of a direction of travel was given through BIM, that's actually been quite positively received from the industry. Saying that actually if we can have another kind of a roadmap or some understanding where government is going with DLT solutions, especially if it's looking at public sector contracting or what's happening with the regulations and regulatory compliance, then that would really help the industry start making decisions about where to focus their efforts on. And more engagement for the client. This was just whether this was drum beating or annoyance from everyone who was talking, to say that actually there is a constant race to the bottom at the moment, which means that whichever way you cut it, it's very difficult for a lot of the main contractors or a lot of the construction industry to make some of these significant investments, because on-site risks are huge and their revenues or their margins are so low. And it's more of a case of going on that transparency element of DLT, of saying, okay, if we can make the final goal, the final product of what we're trying to do more clear, and allow the client to trace it through the development cycle, then that will really help get the message across about how valuable a contract can be in getting the best result rather than the lowest cost result. I think that's a key point here. It's value driven rather than cost driven. And it was a very clear message that came through fairly consistently. Some of that could be because it is DLT related and that can help. Some of it could just be because most of the people I spoke to get very peed off with their clients. It could be some of that sour grapes. Who knows? So in terms of the Catapult, what are we going to be doing about this challenge in terms of, as I said, the acceleration of skills, demonstrations, and kind of engagement? What we're going to be setting up over the next few months are a series of collaborative field labs. Now these are cross-sector. These are not specifically for construction. I'm hoping, because I'm freelance and I want to work, I'm hoping one of them will be a construction-based field lab. And that's what we're working on at the moment, but it's across the board. And the whole idea of the lab, in the sense of working with the Catapult, is that again, we de-risk it and put it into a neutral scenario. So we do all the agreements, we do all the project management, we give the facilities, and we get the various different parties in who would make a DLC-based solution work. And that means that you have the academia, government, corporates, accelerators, the investors, the startups, and the legal people all involved in order to make sure that all the boxes are ticked and all the right processes are gone through in order to develop a proof of concept. Now, we're not trying to boil the ocean here. We're going to be looking at some very, very specific things, some very, very specific applications for DLT. As examples, some of the use cases could be is looking at how the 30-day rule for public sector procurement payments goes through. So if you're on a public sector procurement contract, you have the 30-day payment, and anything over that you should be given a black mark for, but the central government and government office can't track that because it's too onerous. So if we can start putting that into a DLT scenario, which is all automated, then we can potentially start looking at that. It's looking at health and safety qualifications and certifications, saying, okay, how can we ensure that certifications for a specific on-site task cannot be corrupted through forgeries and fake IDs, which is a big challenge with CSCS at the moment. So looking at some quite specific areas, not trying to be overly excitable about it. If you want to know anything else about the field labs, please get in touch. My email will be on the back end of the slide. We are looking to start picking those up over the next 2 months, next 6 weeks to 2 months. So the last bit I was going to talk about was the Transforming Construction Challenge. I'm sure you're all very familiar with the industrial strategy and how the government all the money that government is putting into transforming construction. I've pilfered this slide from Innovate UK or UKRA, as the overarching body is now known as. So without going into too much detail on this, it's this bit at the bottom at the moment with the CR&D research challenges, the 59 million, which is probably going to be of most interest to people, because that's access to funding for collaboration, research and development. So there are various different themes in here. There's 59 million. There's a competition out at the moment for CR&D. It closes at the end of this month, so it's probably a little bit tight to get involved. But they're likely to come out every 4 to 6 months over the next 2 years, with a total of 59 million over the next couple of years. But the key point in here is if you look at all those boxes at the bottom, it's all about productivity. It's all about improving economic export. It's all about transparency, and it's all about speed. And these are key aspects where various different technologies are coming into play. And the CR&D program is for technology applied solutions. It's not these big, as I said, these big monstrous programs. They're collaborative. They're part funded, normally up to 70% if you're an SME from Innovate UK. And I would encourage you to look at the Innovation Funding Service, it's known as, for upcoming competitions, because they are good opportunities there in the Transforming Construction. It's called the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund, very Natalie. And also there's some work coming up with the Cambridge Centre for Digital Build Britain. They're looking at a lot of work at the moment in sort of the research areas, but I reckon in probably about 6 to 9 months we'll start getting into a bit more of the practical start stages, and they have various different tenders coming out there as well. So if you're looking at work to try and forward your agendas, then take a look at these different funding streams. As I say, from the Catapult point of view, we're here to give access to facilities and expertise rather than funding itself. And so that was it. That's my contact details at the bottom if you want to know anything more about the field labs. But I will be here until about 3:30. I then have to unfortunately leave. But I'll be here until 3:30 if you've got any specific questions. Thank you.